Awesome. All right, hopefully you can see me here. Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark, if you don't know me. I'm a friend of Claire's. I'm in the percussion studio. And today I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit about some rock and jazz style drum set. Yeah, let's just get right to it. I'm going to change my angle so you can see me. Hopefully everything playing here. All right, got my hi-hat, got my ride, bell. Hopefully you can see my foot moving. Cool. Okay, so let's just get right to it. Let's start with rock drumming. So, first thing to know about rock drumming is that you want to lay down the time and the attitude all the time. That's your main job. Clear time, number one. So, in order to do that, we'll start with the bass and the snare drum. All right, the bass drum typically lands around 1 and 3. Snare drum lands around 2 and 4. So, start basic and basic. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a couple things to keep in mind here. Bass drum and snare drum stay even in terms of the balance and the density. You don't want none of this. Or the opposite, that. Nice and even. Clear time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, to get my backbeat to come out like that, what I'm doing is I'm playing a rim shot. So I'm not sure if you talked about the rim shots yet, but I'll talk about it just in case. So what I'm doing is I'm hitting my stick. Let me move this stick, actually. Moving my stick to hit right around halfway down the stick, maybe a little bit more. And I'm hitting the head and the rim simultaneously. Right? Gets that crack sound as opposed to. There you go. Gives a little bit more strength. Now, the farther in you go, the thicker it gets. It gets a little bit loud. Typically, though, right around halfway. Right in the middle. Cool? All right. Now let's talk about the hi-hat. So generally, what happens is the hi-hat ends up being too loud. Hi-hat, again, is there for the motor. It's there for the time. So you don't want to make it too in the front, like this. Kind of disrupts what's actually going on with the time feel with the bass and the snare drum. Right? You kind of want it to just glide underneath, keep the whole thing moving. Right now, you don't have to give these downbeats if you don't want. It's kind of slight emphasis. The song could call for you to just play straight, but sometimes it helps a little bit with the feeling. Now let's talk about how I'm playing the hi-hat. Oh, it's perfect. Okay, so I'm actually hitting evenly like this, kind of where the shank and the tip, right? So if you kind of look at the stick here, you see right around here-ish starts to get thick. Up here, it's starting to get a little thin. This is the shank. So you can hit evenly there, get that cymbal, the highs to come out. Now you can hit down here. I once heard this called chunking. Give an accent, but if you play down here, it kind of gets thick the whole time. Generally, you kind of ride up here. Maybe if you're going to give a thick accent, you get down there. Cool, so default, maybe some accents. Here's flat, here's chunked. Flat, chunked. Kind of hear the color difference come out there. Okay, so I'll play it all together one more time. Nice and slow. Eighths on the hi-hat. 1 and 3 bass, 2, 4 snare. Snare, bass, even. Hi-hats, just keeping good time. 1, 2, 3. And so, cool. Okay. Threw some extra things in there. Let's talk about those. So, you get tired of just doing this all the time. That's the money maker, but you could spice it up a little bit. So, what you can do, one of the first things you can do, you can change your bass drum pattern. Actually, let's talk about the hi-hat pattern first. That's kind of interesting. One of the things you can do with a hi-hat pattern is you can open it to give an accent on the and of 4. So, playing along, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Now, this is one of those things where you don't have to get down there and chunk. You can just real quick. It's like a passing tone, passing accent. You can bring it out with the bass drum or without it. So I'll do it without the bass drum, then I'll do it with the bass drum, and you can see how it differs. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's without. Here's with. Without. With. Okay, now, you don't want to get too crazy with that because it's really just spice. Just throwing some spice in the soup. You don't want to do too much. Kind of throws the whole thing off. Just once in a while you can put it in there. Next thing you can do is you can change how many times you play on the bass drum. You can throw some doubles in there. So, one of the good places you could put it is on the and of 3 leading into beat 3. So normally you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 2, and 3, 4. Here's the normal 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Now we add it. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. Now, you can also put doubles where the downbeat is as well. So you get. As long as 1, 2, 3, and 4 are clear, you can get creative with it. Just only do what the song calls for. Our main job is to keep time, make the song feel good. That's number 1 always. Okay. Let me bring up my list here. All right. You can also change what the snare drum does. Now this one has a little bit less variation to it because it's really where the backbeat comes in and that you want to stay strong. You can spice it up a little bit. One of the things you can do is you can add an 8th note after 4. So instead of just doing 1, 2, 3, 4, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4. You can add that last 8th note, give it a little carryover to the next section. So 1. You can also bring out the hi-hat that we talked about earlier with the snare drum. Now I'm throwing in a little bit of extra couple in there, and those are called ghost notes. That kind of gives the texture a little bit of feeling. But that's later on down the road. You can always search YouTube for some good grace note videos. Okay. Cool, let's move on to some other variations on different instruments. And we'll come into some more advanced stuff on the hi-hat here. So, all of those eighth notes that you do on the hi-hat, you can do it on the ride. Typically, the ride comes in when the chorus comes in. Any kind of bigger cymbal gives a little bit of an oceanic feel, so it opens it up a lot. So, we're riding in the verse, right? Now we're going to the chorus. You notice a lot of my impacts came on the crash cymbal up here, and most of it I stayed on the ride. Same balance principles apply to the ride and the hi-hat. You don't want to get too much with the ride. It gets in the way. You do want it to, excuse me, you do want it to fill out the space. Just remember, 1, 2, 3, 4 are king, always. Another thing you can do on the ride is you can just simplify it, especially if it's going faster. You can play just quarters. So let's say we're playing a rock song. It's like right about here. Now let's say you're playing, you want to slow it down. Notice when I go to the quarters, it kind of gives it a steadier feel, but it moves forward still. All right, this kind of gets a little bit much. All right, that'll kind of ground it a little bit and really make the time clear so the band is grooving once you're in the chorus. Now, you don't have to go to the ride every time you go to the chorus. Typically, that's what happens. All right, let's see. What else we got here? Write down some stuff. Okay. Did the changing rhythms on the snare and bass drum. We're good with that. Did the quarters, did the eighths. Okay, let's talk about some stuff you can do on the floor tom now. Floor tom, you could do the same idea with the eighth notes. On the hi-hat, you can put it on the floor tom. Now, what generally happens here, it'll get real dark. Maybe like a groovy transition with the bass or something. Anything that kind of matches the low sounds. Now you'll notice because this one is so low, it does start to muddy up the bass drum. So you got to be careful with the balance. Remember, that's your job, no matter what. As consistent as you can with that stuff to make the time feel good. Sometimes you can add some hi-hats in there to give some contrast from the lows to the highs. That's why I threw that in there. Cool. And the last little variation I got for you is some 16 notes on the hi-hat. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You can do it with alternating 16ths, or you can do it with one-hand 16ths. Now, the one-hand 16ths obviously have a limitation. Obviously have a limitation because you can't go. You can only go so fast. Right, now that little motion I'm doing, go back to my hi-hat cam here. That little motion I'm doing, it's kind of like a back and forth idea. Right, not so much up and down, but this kind of idea. Almost like a pool cue, like I'm shooting pool. Just trying to get a little bit more shank so I can get that accent. Not doing this. It's a little bit chunky. kind of tossing it forward. I'll do it a little bit slower so you can kind of see it. You don't have to get such a crazy accent every time. Remember, this is just the ticking underneath, just making the motor go, that's all. You can also do a two-handed thing. Now I'm going to have to put my camera back here because I'm going to use both hands. You can also do a two-handed thing. 1, 2, and 4 and 1. Typically, if you start off the right hand will come down for those accents. So, I'll play the one hand 16-note groove, and then I'll switch in between the two hands. You can kind of see how the feel changes. 1, 2, 3. 4. 1, 2, 3. Cool. Hopefully this has been helpful so far. Okay, finally show my face again. Hopefully it's been helpful so far. If you have any questions on anything that I'm doing in the video, please feel free to ask Claire, and I can easily clarify or simplify anything if it's becoming too confusing. Cool. So let's review a little bit. So, basic feels. Snare drum, hi-hat. Kick, 1, 3. Try to keep that consistent no matter what variation you do. 2, 4 on the snare drum. Try to keep that consistent. Right? You can throw in some little grace notes there if you want. Maybe some 4 ands. Some doubles. Especially if you're doing some like pep songs. Like Hey Mickey. 1. Oh Mickey, you're so fun, you blow my mind, hey Mickey. That kind of idea. Bass drum, you can throw some doubles in there on 1, 2, and 3. 1. My Corona is more like it. Anyway, okay. Hi-hat typically stays nice and even. Oh, I don't know if you can see my feet here. Try to. There we go. Let's try to do that. All right, typically stays even. Throw some accents on the and a 4 there if you'd like. You can play 16 notes. One hand pull cue motion. Do it on the ride so you can see it. Or you can do 2 hands. I really like playing on the ride because you can hear how the sound totally changes when I change just sticking. Cool. All right. Now I'll do some variations and I'll do some fills. Some things to keep in mind in fills. There's some different ways, different lengths. There's a 4-bar fill. There's a 2-bar. Sorry, not a 4-bar. 4-count fill, a whole bar fill, a 2-count, and a 1-count. So I'll play just a little bit. I'll vamp for a while, and I'll try to throw them all in there in different places. Try to call them out as we do it. So here's a 1-count. 1, 2, 3. Let's do a 2-count fill. Now a 1-count fill. Cool part about fills is that you don't have to play anything to actually play a fill. I'll do a 2-count fill. Silence is gold. 4-bar fill. Hopefully that's helpful. So typically the fills happen as transitions into other ideas. Don't just happen in between verse and chorus, or anytime you play 4 bars and you get to the end, you got to do a fill. It's not really about that. It's really just about introducing new ideas. Okay, last thing I'm going to do, go over some jazz real quick. There's some basic stylistic things, and that'll be it. So, feel, number one. Number one in everything is feel. Ride, hi-hat. Hi-hat, 2 and 4. That is king, no matter what. So you want to make sure you can hear that always. This actually might be a little bit too soft. Basic ride pattern. Dang, spang, a lang, spang, a lang, spang, a lang. You want to make it feel good. You want the motion to feel good. A teacher of mine once told me you want it to feel like you're going up to the fridge. That's how relaxed you are. It's open in the fridge. Theoretically, you can play a gig like that. Just with the ride nice and steady like that. And hi-hat. Now, there's obviously some variation you can throw in there based on what's going on with the melodic material. We won't get into that right now. Next thing I want you to think about is the bass drum. The bass drum is very underneath. It's more of a feeling thing. Actually, let me move my camera here. It's more of a feel. So you don't want to do any of this. Kind of ruins it. Coolness is up here on the cymbals. Everything else. The bass is really made to outline the actual bass, which is typically over here next to your ride bass player. So you just want to kind of outline what he's doing and make it feel good, not so much bam, punch it as hard as you can, like in rock or anything like that. Snare drum typically goes on beat 4 if there's going to be an accent, or whenever there's any kind of crazy hit in the brass or in the rest of the bands. Right, so if I'm just riding, oops. You don't have to hit 4 at every bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. One thing to keep in mind is that in jazz, you're just trying to go with the hits. Just trying to go with the accents that the rest of the band is outlining. So anything that kind of gets outside of that isn't really about the style. All right. Last thing I'll talk about is some comping on the snare drum. So comping is just kind of filling in the gaps in between solos. So in jazz, you have the head, you have a solo, head, some solos. In those solos, you typically just keep time as best you can, and you can throw some variation in there with the snare drum. Now, you don't want to get in too crazy with it because comping can be very easily overdone. You just want to make it tasteful. So if they're playing a solo, let's say there's a little window. Comping can be as simple as one note. Notice my bass drum staying underneath. The thing that's leading it is the hi-hat the whole time. No matter what you do, you want the ride, the feeling of it to stay the same. Now, a little bit at the end there, it's started to get a little loud. It's not really too stylistic. Again, style comes from what the rest of the band is doing. So if you're fitting into the whole package, you're doing a good job. All right, let's do a little quick rundown of this one. I'll build it up, talk about a little bit of the comping in between, and then we'll be done. So, first things first. 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the way you play this, real short. You don't really want to have your heel down. Try to see if you can see my feet here. Not sure if you can see that very well. You don't want to have your heel down, like on the pedal. This is tough. You want it to lift up a little bit. Now, you don't have to get super on tippy toes or nothing. Right, but not flat down, kind of up. You want to hit like the ball of your foot, a lot of surface area. So the sound is like chick, 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 real short. Chick, chick, chick. 1, 2. The next comes the ride. Dang, spang a lang. Dang, spang a lang, spang a lang. Now, if you listen to different drummers, they have different styles on how they bring this out, but you can decide that for yourself. The bass next. Remember, never losing 2 and 4 in the hi-hat with a sound. It's trying to lead it the whole time. Now, bass drum doesn't have to hit 1 every time. Add some snares in there. It's really about the phrasing. Whenever there's an accent in the horns, you want to bring that out in whatever way you can, orchestration. All right. And that's a wrap. So, just go over a couple little things at the end there. Yeah, I think the best advice I would have for this kind of style, for not just jazz, but also rock, is just to listen to a lot of it and try to get the attitudes, right? Like I said in the very beginning, your job is time, but it's also attitude. And the attitudes differ greatly from jazz to rock. So do a lot of listening. You know, watch a lot of people. Some great drummers that you can watch. Neil Porcaro, Neil Peart, rest in peace. Dave Grohl, John Bonham, Ringo Starr. Some jazz drummers that you can listen to, some contemporary ones. Let's see, not too well versed in jazz. You can listen to the old school stuff. You can listen to big band stuff. Buddy Rich. You can listen to a myriad of people in that genre. I'm not too well versed, but maybe I'll send a list to Claire, and I'll actually get the information since I'm not too sure right now. But yeah, so I hope this was helpful. I hope that we gained a lot of stuff from it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask Claire, and I'll be happy to clarify. Cool. Thanks, guys.